This is a lesson on advanced pivot table. We've been given datasets for 3 years where we have the transaction dates, we have the invoice number, the country of shipping, which have 4 countries, and we have the amount at the end here. We want to learn how to generate multiple reports from the same dataset and see how we can use slicers and the Excel data model to create dynamic reports. The first step in this is to add our data to the data model. You can either add the data from PowerPivot, where you add the data to the data model, or access the PowerPivot window used under data. Then under data tools, you can go to PowerPivot window. Once on PowerPivot, you can now navigate the tools for PowerPivot, including the data view and the diagram view. Now, getting started, we add our data to the data model, go to PowerPivot, add data to data model. Make sure that your table has headers, click OK. This will load the PowerPivot environment, which allows you now to rename your data source, which is table 1 down here. So I'm going to call this shipping data. You can toggle the views of the calculation area. You can see the full data set, or check out the calculation area where you're going to put your measures. After this, we'll create our first measure. You can either create right from Excel or create inside PowerPivot for Excel window. So I want to create my first measure called totals. I want to call this total sales. So I'll come here, then I'll say total sales, put a full column that equals to sum of amount, then close this and press enter. You'll see total sales show up at the calculation area. You can see my measure here where it shows me the total sales is 583,525,106. I can close now the PowerPivot for Excel window and take back to Excel. Now, since my measure that I created did not have a data format, whether it's a currency or a decimal or what, I can edit that by going to PowerPivot, go to measures, then manage measures. I'm going to go to total sales, then edit it so that I make sure that this is a number and make sure that I have the 1000 separator, check my formula, and I can see there are no errors. Then I click OK. Once I'm done, I can now create my first pivot table. So I'll click there. Then I want to create a pivot table for category and amount. So pivot table, and I'm going to pull this from the data model. The normal pivot tables gets data from the table or range. But for this, since we have the data model activated, so I'm going to click from data model. Then click OK. The pivot table fields will show here. This is a shipping data. There's a typo there. So I expand that, pick the category. So into the category, which is this, put on rows. And when I pull down, instead of using the amount, I'm going to use my calculated measure, which is total sales, which is, will come there. I see that. We are familiar with pivot tables where we deal with dates and requires us to group. Let's test. So inside pivot table from data model, then we use the transaction date. So I'm going to pick the transaction date and pick the amount. Now to summarize this per year and per month, it requires us to right click and group it by months and years. This is perfect correct, but when using the data model, we have to generate our own calendar in PowerPivot. So I'm going to delete this and go back to PowerPivot to generate my calendar. So I'll go to data, PowerPivot window. Then from there, I need to generate my calendar table from the transaction date. So I'll select the transaction date, then design, then date table, and click new. So I generate a new calendar table. Our calendar table has been generated. I rename this back. Now I'm done. Next is to create a relationship between the shipping data and the calendar. You'll click home, then change the data view to diagram view. From the diagram view, I can now create a relationship between the transaction date and the date from the calendar table. I'm going to create a one-to-many relationship. So click on date and pull it to transaction date, where now the date in the calendar table is related to the date in the shipping data table. I can now close this and go back to my report environment. Insert pivot table from data model. Click OK. But since I have the date hierarchy, I'll pick the year from here and the month, put that on the rows, then pick amount and place this amount or pull the amount from the shipping table. I can have it like that. Then change the design so that I change this to the tabular form. Now I have my report set. Then the third and last report is a report on country and sales. So insert pivot table, then I'll get that from the data model, click OK. Then choose here the country. So put the country, so total sales will go to values, and the country is here. I pull that and put it here. Now we have a field called the shipping mode in this dataset. Now I want to slice and dice my reports using the shipping mode. So I'll go to Insert, Slicer. Then the slicer will come from the data model. So I'll click on Data Model, click here, and click Open. So now I'll see the calendar field, there's a calendar table, and the shipping data field. Here I want to pick the ship mode. So I'll pick the ship mode there and click OK. Now I have my 4 ship modes where I can use to slice and dice my reports. Now, before you do that, we need to name our pivot table so that we have custom names. So I'll go to pivot table analyze, name this pivot table 9. I'm going to call this is by category. This one is by year or by year and month, while the third pivot table is grouped and by country. So this will be by country, like that. So I'm done. Now I need to connect my slicer to the 3 pivot tables. Right click on the slicer, then click report connections. On the report connections, you'll see the custom names for our pivot table. So I'll tick by category, by country, and by year and month. Then click OK. Now, should I change this to first class, you'll see my report changes based on the shipping category that I have or the shipping mode I have. Thanks for watching.